My point in describing this part of the process is to share how profound a manless space is for a woman. Something happens for women when they are allowed this gift. We know it in small ways through the joy we have in being in the company of our female friends and female loved ones. But the sustained absence of masculine energy allows a whole different level of freedom that few living women have ever had the opportunity to experience. Even if no actual men are near her, almost anything her eyes light upon, a newspaper, the television, her computer, are constructed by and construed through the male gaze. The moment the masculine appears, the feminine shrinks to fit. Her allegiance immediately moves to the masculine, whether to please or placate, to rebel or revolt, or simply to defend against through immediate alignment or passivity. Whatever her response, the masculine dominates any arena in which it appears. Most men have no idea that this occurs for women. There is no equivalent for them. They question and wonder at woman's inability to hold her own, her apparent weakness or fear to be herself. Women equally judge themselves for what feels like lack of self-esteem or lack of being centered or aware. Woman feels guilty and confused and angry at herself by this feeling of the leash. But I have never met a woman who doesn't acknowledge the change in herself the moment male presence appears. My husband, who had been nothing but supportive and loving, was puzzled at my homecoming. I felt tender towards him, but also wary and much quieter than he was used to. I held a preciousness that was not just mine, but belonged to woman herself. How could I possibly protect and honor it? The best I could do as the days went by was to be as true to myself as I could safely be. This has been my dilemma ever since. Through all the years since, I have struggled with this knowing and this inability to share it or help it grow. Words can be helpful, but only a little, perhaps to whet an appetite or to trigger a deep memory of times or lives past. I incorporated it as much as I could into my workshops, but I knew that without the experience of the feminine virgin, the original meaning of which is independent, autonomous, whole in herself, no woman or man can fathom its strength or depth. As I've said, it's not really shareable in the way of words. It is only shared through an openness to my very being, and that openness cannot occur in the presence of opposition to the feminine, and it must be seen by eyes that are ready to see. I don't say this to make myself special. Everyone, in every woman, and also somewhere in every man, the goddess lives. I am certain of it. Yet in our time she is still a tiny seed. Many women do sense it and are committed to women's issues and to their women friends, supporting each other and continuing to delve into their depths as they can allow. In select groups and in forward-looking communities, there are women determined to re-own themselves, intuitively knowing they must close themselves away for the healing. But this is a trickle, yet to become a groundswell. Very few women would be offered the opportunity I had, and fewer still be interested in taking 12 days out of their lives and dropping the layers necessary in taking this initiation journey. How can you yearn for what you don't know exists? Yet we do, we women. I see it all the time. It is unnamed, but there it is in depression, addiction, cynicism, hatred of men, worship of men, hatred of self, competition between women. The sorrow swells. When a woman starts to become conscious of what has happened to her sisters, her mother and grandmothers, from living in a patriarchal world, she is both angered and frightened. For some women, this never occurs. She lives a whole life certain of her place in the patriarchal hierarchy. But for those women whose eyes become opened to the dynamic, the bottom drops out. What was once solid ground, a perhaps confusing but confirmed by convention belief in her patriarchally assigned value and purpose as female, is seen in all its cruel limitations. What she has allowed, what she has tolerated becomes blatantly clear. Her catering to the masculine is seen for what it is, an implicit belief that her survival depends upon it. She has been trained from childhood. Perhaps her feet were not bound, her clitoris was not cut off, but she has been groomed by the patriarchy nonetheless, which includes her well-meaning mother and all women who surround her, prompted to worship its ideal of beauty, her appeal to the male, the be-all and end-all of her existence. She sacrifices herself to its altar, primarily focusing on her body, the idol of the male gaze. Her breasts too small? Surgically implant silicone sacs into her chest. Too big? Have her breasts partially cut off, reduced. Does her brow wrinkle when she frowns? Paralyze her forehead with Botox. No one will ever know an angry or depressive thought ever travels through that pretty little head. No man will ever have to worry about her unhappiness or see marks of experience on her seamless face. And equally, if not more important, other women will admire her perfection. She can stand as an example of the highest ideal, someone or something to aspire to. Through her choices and values, she teaches the next generation, those younger women who are still searching for who they are. We blame men, thinking the patriarchy means men, but it is women who perpetuate it by refusing to imagine standing outside of it. Women cannot break away from the patriarchy. It is in their own heads. Their belief in it allows it to exist. Until they face up to this fact and choose to take responsibility for the part they play, until they begin to trust the woman in themselves, to trust the feminine in each other, nothing can change. And this elusive feminine is just that, still elusive. It takes an incredible courage, a faith in the unknown, a trust in a woman's deepest intuition to break free. Or perhaps only evolution and grace itself can accomplish it. But as long as women kowtow to masculine ideas of beauty, power, and success, they are not available to see or feel the feminine in themselves or in other women. Adhering to the culture's values, they judge and condemn, if not overtly, often covertly, other women who don't measure up. They cannot be trusted to be a part of a genuine sisterhood. Like animals raised in captivity, animals which have had to fight for their scrap of food in their cages, women have lost access to their natural knowing, and along with it, their recognition of their own essence. It is difficult to face this as women, but we must. While mothers subject their daughters to pain, all in the cause of beauty, whether it be foot binding or a fixed nose, the message is loud and clear. You are not okay as you are. You need to do these things to survive, to be successful and happy in the world. Who you are, what you were born as, needs work. When women celebrities are improving their faces, denying age with cosmetic procedures, starving themselves to be a perfect size 0, or implanting pockets of silicone into their breasts, even these, the most revered and acclaimed of woman, is saying, I could not be famous, I could not be rich, I would not be acceptable or loved if I allowed myself to be just what I am. And woe to the woman who rebels. Justine Bateman, now 55 and former star of 80s sitcom Family Ties, talks of how she has been trolled on social media and attacked by both men and women for allowing herself to age naturally. In her refusal to undergo age-defying procedures, she has suffered private and professional criticism. Celebrities are expected to be on stage every moment, ridiculed if they appear normal. We are dumbfounded to see a Frances McDormand or a Chloe Zhao accept their Academy Awards plain and simple, no makeup, at an event usually reserved for the most flamboyant of displays. Though many of us applauded their chutzpah, many others, both women and men, found it embarrassing and cringeworthy, if not blatantly disrespectful to the honor bestowed. We yearn for sisterhood, for women friends who understand us and who have walked the fire like us. We desperately want someone to trust, someone we can be ourselves with. But one of the most common complaints of women is that we don't trust each other. In the business world and in other patriarchal venues where women must compete, this is at least understandable. But the deeper pain, the wariness, though, comes from the breaking of a more primary trust. As private and as individual the choice may seem to alter the body, there is a judgment being reflected back to us, about ourselves, about all women. Trust lies dormant, an open question, when we see a woman who has shown such lack of tenderness and compassion for herself, for her own body, who has sacrificed her reality, her being to the patriarchy. Caught in the tyranny of her own internalized male gazer, she makes of herself a living doll, believing she has escaped the fate of her less fortunate sisters, those who, by choice or lack of access, have not availed themselves of the wonders of plastic surgery. Such a woman, and there are millions of them now, has donned a mask, a permanently false face to please the patriarchy. She has defaced herself, her very flesh fashioned for the patriarchy. She and her children and her beloved will never see her true face, who she really is, who she really would have been. She may never feel a personal grief or loss, feeling more a relief and a safety afforded by her beautiful disguise. But the Great Mother, the she of all women, hangs her head in shame and sorrow. The defacement of the goddess causes no less sorrow than that felt when we see an innocent child crippled and ravaged by chemical warfare, its face melted, deformed for life. Women must stop this. It is time we all begin to develop the courage to be real, to be ourselves. Woman must start over, must begin again. Our fight for equality, for recognition, has not worked. How could it? War begets war. Fights for rights simply reaffirm our impotency, not a growing power. Power is quiet, firm, peaceful. It wins by inviting surrender. It attracts through love. We want men to hear us, but the desire itself in those words presupposes victimhood, and we profess it in a male language of threat. Our voices say the same things all their male enemies proclaim. You are unfair. You are taking from us. We want more from you. You are using us. Look at what you've done to us. We will fight you to the death. And we do. And we lose. Our victories are minuscule in light of the enormity of the misunderstanding. This is the voice of an old consciousness. Men are not the enemy. They, like women, suffer under a delusion of a false, made-up reality, a reality of either or, rather than both and. The problem may be language itself, the word as weapon. Shortcuts to represent objects and ideas, mostly referring to the past and directed towards the future, useful for warfare and for hunting, words were a necessary and helpful invention to ensure survival of our species. But now they are killing us. Along with the patriarchy and the advent of the written word, the language of logic has developed as humanity's lingua franca. We see this advance as the mark of civilization. In our own day and age, woman has magnificently performed in this man's world. She has outmanned man in most academic endeavors and in many other fields. But the men of the patriarchy, the men who still wield the power, accept her only begrudgingly. And her success, her progress, has been slow, and usually only through sheer numbers and the trials of generations has she managed to gain a foothold and have real feminine influence, such as that within the Scandinavian countries, or the fresh, alive face of a Jacinda Ardern. We can continue at this snail's pace, or we can have the courage to try something completely different. Rather than pounding our fists on men's chests or men's institutional doors, we could simply walk away. Like the elephant, who at any moment could turn straight into the jungle, we are free. We can stop turning the wheels of the patriarchal machine. We can stop feeding the monster. We women can, for once, see each other. Investigate this jungle, this lush undergrowth of the unknown. Serve each other. Offer who we are and what we have to each other. Acknowledge our shared womanhood. Become one mass of silent, undulating woman, going about her business of loving herself, loving her world, loving her man or her woman, her family, her community, by being true to her heart. Become our own handmaidens, but for our own souls and soul itself, not for the heartless soul of the patriarchy. Yes, there may be consequences, but dry ground must be plowed before it can be planted. The heavy hooves of escaping elephants need to churn the soil, to make a path for the rest to follow. If women understand what is at stake, their lives, the lives of their daughters and sons, the life of the planet, continuing existence itself, they will, slowly, woman by woman, join their sisters. This is a movement to reclaim life itself, to hand back to woman and to man their birthright as divine beings, one in service to the other, each complementing the other, regardless of the shape or sex of their genitals, or the numbers of X's and Y's of their chromosomes. The suffocation created by a gluttonous, pompous patriarchy must be burst through to reveal its actual vacuum, then be energetically filled by a healed feminine, no matter how it is physically housed. Gender is much more fluid than was once thought. The loosening of definition of what it is to be male and what it is to be female can only be good for the female, as either way it is bucking the patriarchal rigidity of sexual definition. While it is certainly true that any being can objectify another, breaking out of the patriarchal pattern breaks solid walls of a particular type of objectification, the male gaze towards women. Even if LGBTQI people are objectifying each other, as may well be the case, especially with the ultra-female sexualization posed by the gay queen culture, still, the exaggeration, the almost cartoon characterization of woman itself healthily strains the patriarchal stereotype. A freedom and a playfulness are introduced, equalizing the duodynamic, which is mostly lacking in patriarchal male gazing. In saying this, thank God for the emerging movement of gay culture and the gender fluidity becoming normalized in the younger generation. More and more it is becoming obvious that not one of us is male or female in any pure sense. We are all a mixture, and when that mixture is appreciated and honored for its particular ratio, all of us are freed, free to be our natural selves. It bodes well to be seeing the days when lesbian women can choose their attire or hairstyles, not in resistance to or defiance of the patriarchy, but in celebration of their unique selves, just as a gay man may relax, allowing his natural feminine to shine without resorting to often grotesque and exaggerated female adornment, which, in its obvious falseness and planned seductiveness, are the signs of feminine imprisonment, not freedom. And yet, paradoxically, the flamboyance and playfulness exhibited by gay culture has given women themselves more permission to accept their own uniqueness and expanded upon many traditional definitions of beauty. The patriarchy is threatened by this shake-up, but the feminine is fully served by it. Any loosened rigidity has only opened the doors to more of what's been missing, the feminine. And bravo to those gay men who have unreservedly claimed it. They, often more than our own mothers, have led the way. For those of us inhabiting female bodies, who can only guess what it must be to be born male, the challenge of self-love is particularly fraught. We've had few healthy examples, no benchmark to aspire to. We've had to feel our way blindly, gulping in doubt and fear as we push forward to bring into existence what our intuition encourages. Greater and greater numbers of us are doing this. Love for the self, love for each other, not turning our eyes away from our sisters, not putting our hands behind our backs when the patriarchy hurts our daughters, our mothers. To protest, yes, to stand firm against abuse of all kinds, but to also protest with our nature, our hearts. As said, the medium is the message. Words alone, except perhaps for poetry or accompanied by music, rarely reach the heart. As I was able to experience firsthand those many years ago, woman's language is sound itself, and movement, and feelings which show through the body, through a dance of delight, or through tears and tremors of agony, or terror, or grief, wailing, roaring with laughter, dancing and screeching in excitement, or slowly feeling, seeing, touching, giving time for things to sink in. These are women's ways. The last women who employed them freely were burned at the stake as witches, or put into insane asylums. We existing women of the 21st century are more man than woman in our learned natures. What I am calling woman's ways of communicating are considered primitive, more aligned with animals than with human consciousness. And certainly we reason. We've evolved to something more sophisticated than grunting and groaning. We'd be embarrassed, humiliated even, if alone with no audience but ourselves, to explore these communicative avenues. And if we did try, who would listen? Who would have the ears to hear? Other than our self-abandonment in love-making, or forgetfulness in extreme excitement or anger, we stay politely contained, constrained, locked in our heads, appropriate and mature. I believe the free feminine and the hint of what could develop as the female gaze must be close to what I experienced during the descent of Inanna, when all the invisible shackles fell away from me, when I felt safe, unseen, and unexamined by the male gaze, when I was simply looked upon by my sisters, who looked upon my heart as it shone through my eyes. My body softened, my movements slowed, my joy became an offering. I had permission to feel and to express repressed pain and rage, what felt like a bottomless well of grief. This freedom and sisterly support opened doors long locked. I was given access to other worlds in myself, a universe formerly unexplored but intuited. A mere 12 days is not enough to erase a lifetime of conditioning, yet the new memories became body memories, and with intention and focus, and most importantly, relaxation, I can fall back into the center of myself, that core where I can say, "Ah, knowing all is well and I am well. I realize the environment in which I experienced this is not easy to recreate in our busy, progress-directed world, and I am not suggesting women sacrifice the progress they have gained. After all, women have only recently, historically, been able to have any agency in their own lives. They will not be quick to compromise it or risk it, nor should they. But rituals and initiations are not the only ways to shift consciousness. A new world, a new century requires new ways. The human spirit yearns towards wholeness and will find ways to grow it. There have always been wise ones in our midst that are sought out by those with eyes to see. Transpersonal psychology and trauma therapy are good starting points, but these, again, require time and resources not available to all women. I've pondered how women might have a taste of this experience and perhaps feel the small stirrings of possibility, of the new in themselves. I've explored these things in myself, and I will share here what I feel might be useful. Choose a day, or organize one, where you can be assured of being alone, in a private and safe space. If circumstances don't allow a full day, choose as many consecutive hours as you can manage. When the coast is clear, undress and have a leisurely bath or shower. As you dry yourself, look at your body in the mirror as though it is the body of a stranger. Register your feelings, your opinions about this body. If your habit is to wear makeup, jewelry, perfume, style your hair, wear clothes which you might normally choose for their pleasing effect, don't. Choose clothing simply for its comfort. When you are dressed, look again at yourself in the mirror. Examine your face, your eyes. How do you feel about yourself, your face? Now imagine that all those you love and all those you casually know, workmates, friends, neighbors, are all meeting you now for the first time, just as you appear right now. What do you think they see? Who might they think you are? As you imagine this, own any feelings of fear, shame, embarrassment, or terror in just being you, unadorned, uncamouflaged, visible and vulnerable. If you feel the urge to cry, scream, laugh, or if your body wants to express in movement, allow it to the best of your ability. You might need a pillow to make noise into if you have neighbors close by. Let the movement complete itself before you move on. Next, consciously slow down. Begin to purposefully breathe. Long, slow inhales. Long, slow exhales. As you prepare a meal for yourself or perform any task, move slowly at about half your normal pace. You may feel your mind rebel, or you may feel foolish and self-conscious, even though you are all by yourself. Try to stay with it. Register your resistance. As you continue this, see if you can distinguish any difference in how you experience your body, your feelings. Your muscles may begin to feel strangely more alive, more inhabited. Now, most challenging, slow down your words, both in your thinking mind and by practicing speaking those thoughts out loud. Purposefully talk very slowly. You may feel silly and feel as though you are going to laugh, or you may feel emotional and oddly vulnerable. Do your best to treat this as a serious exercise. Now, consciously relax your jaw, your tongue. You may notice that words, language, becomes difficult and even goes away. Thinking and speech are inextricably linked. To relax the tongue disallows thinking. If you can use sounds instead of words, do. Mms, ahs, perhaps yawns or expressions of irritation or of pleasure. Give yourself permission to accentuate sounds with movements. Let your body sway, dance, stomp your feet, yell or cry if you can safely do so. As you end your practice period, sit upright in a chair. Close your eyes and invite your body to soften. Breathe softness in. Let it infuse your very cells. Feel your muscles begin to melt. Feel your bones settle deeply. Feel your mind vanish and your heart open in gratitude for your simple isness. Now, soften more and more and more. Begin to smile. This can be a revealing practice. Most of us have internalized our own male gaze, our patriarchal minder, who will be quick to point out our inadequacies and our imperfections, our useless feelings, and the wasted time it takes to feel them. You don't need a man around to feel the leash pulling at your ankle. Perhaps a mother told you you were too tall, too fat, too slow, too dumb, too anything, or not enough. Rarely is it the male himself who directly forces the woman into the shape of his fantasies. A powerful historical dynamic has made we women the willing bondmaids to the patriarchy, all in the name of love, the finding and keeping of it. It's taken us a long time to see how we have fed a monster in our desire to please men. As their enablers, we have fed into their own learned addictions, exalted their unconscious patterns, and then held them responsible for where we find ourselves, angry at their supposed unwillingness to rescue us from our self-abuse. As awareness grows, perhaps your courage will allow you to share this practice, or parts of it, with a trusted friend. Sharing a new way of relating, of being, anchors it in a real way. Eventually, you may feel secure enough in yourself to, in small moments, become this being in the presence of your partner, or your children, or your workmates. This may feel awkward and affected in the beginning, but gradually you can begin to wear this part of yourself more naturally. You still have access to your speedy, directed, can-do self, your own so-called masculine attributes. It's not one or the other that is better. It's allowing both to serve, to dance with both partners in the self, and then with others. This softer way of being is an inspiration in a sacred way. Love shows itself in its simplicity and plainness, its naturalness. Like new lovers who delight in every little thing about the beloved, this slowness and embodiment invites real seeing, real being seen, true joining, true communication. It is an aspect, a choice that I call the feminine. This, I believe, is the gift we can offer to one another as women and to the men in our lives. We can reveal our reality, our feelings, our moment-by-moment experience of our isness. I think of my two grandmothers. My father's mother was stern, beautiful, physically perfect. She lived to be 103, and to the day she died, still dyed her hair a rich brunette and had her nails done weekly. She wouldn't be seen without a full face of makeup. I have no idea how she looked without it. She exercised religiously and ate sparingly. Her home was immaculate. We children always felt the intruders. My mother's mother was jolly, large, full-bosomed, and always hugging us. Her unshaved armpits had a rich animal smell. Her toenails were black in summer from gardening barefoot in her garden. She baked bread and spread butter and homemade jam on warm slices for us when we visited. While the dishes piled up, she read us fairy tales and answered all our odd questions about life. Her hair was always unkempt, and her many chin whiskers of keen interest to us. We adored her. I still think of her as the most influential woman of my life. My own mother was more swayed by her mother-in-law, and tried her hardest to be that kind of woman for her husband and for us. Thankfully, her genetics won out most of the time, and she reverted to her playful, natural self when alone with us kids. These two grandmothers could not have been more different, and I have no doubt about which one epitomized the feminine. I'm not trying to glamorize the unglamorous. Just the opposite. My frumpy, said with all the affection in the world, grandmother was by far the more beautiful. If my father's mother had been open and kind, I may very well have been as close to her. But in her case, her beauty was a shield. My point is that there is a requisite of acceptance and self-love that must be the core, and it is not easily seen or felt by most women. To take that journey takes a whole new kind of courage and humility. It begins privately. It comes from the inside out. It takes a brutal honesty, a genuine inventory of all the ways we have sabotaged ourselves and withheld ourselves from our loved one by perpetuating a system which has damaged all of us, including those we name the perpetrators. Yes, we can continue to work within the system itself, to march against, to call out, to name, but without also pointing the finger back to ourselves, no real change can occur. We remain victims. We can cheer our small victories, but in the larger scheme of things, the patterns adhere. The female gaze starts here, with a dawning and then an acknowledgement of the mystery of woman's pain. She must move through her confusion and her shame at seeing how she has prostituted herself, splayed herself upon a false altar, how she has mistakenly equated beauty with changing her natural self instead of accentuating her individuality. My particular initiation was abrupt and earth-shattering, but it has taken years to uncover the subtleties of self-abuse, to dismantle the identity I had structured from birth to my mid-40s. I am now 73. As time has passed in my own life, very slowly and gradually, I have had the courage to let the facade fall away. As Germaine Greer stated in The Change, her book on menopause, I finally came to the realization that, to paraphrase her, my face is for looking out of, not for being looked at. I can't say it has been painless, or that I haven't caved and run back to the patriarchal fold at times of fear and stress. But I am more me now than I had even imagined was possible those many years ago. I have developed a fondness, if not always a 100% acceptance, for my naturalness, a found comfort in my body, an appreciation and a glory in my unadorned essence. At one time, at the height of patriarchy, it did matter if women satisfied the male gaze. When women were nothing but chattel, a Chinese mother bound her daughter's feet to give her a better chance for marriage and to not be put on the street to beg. Genital mutilation satisfied archaic patriarchal beliefs about women and their lustful, sinful nature. A woman with a clitoris was considered a bad gamble. But we don't have to do these things anymore. These things hurt women, not just through botched cosmetic surgeries, but through continuing a collective mindset that keeps women separated and secretive, jealous and insecure. Our survival does not depend upon the shape of our nose or the size of our breasts. There are other ways we can survive, outside the parameters of satisfying the male gaze. We are moving into a new time, a century or centuries of the rise of the feminine. It's time we moved into it with all we are, not as facsimiles of old-style perfection. And there is a place for adornment, times and events for accentuating the beauty we knew ourselves to be as little girls, and that we can now reclaim as the women we are. Like a fragrant, vibrant bloom in a wild bouquet of colorful flowers, nothing feels so good to a woman as to feel beautiful to shine her radiance, to be seen in all her magnificence, her attire and jewelry and hairstyle and makeup expressing her unique self, worn in the sense of celebration, as ritual, as gift to all, coming from the core of the authentic woman, who in her strength and ease and self-love can shine and share the goddess in her body, regardless of her size or her age, her color or her quirks. She flows, she dances, her smile lights up the room. Her grace abounds. Her decorated being honors her, and honors the goddess, and honors us all. And back to men for a moment. We women love men. This is natural and right for us. Our yearning to selfhood does not exclude them. But how can they know us when we hide from ourselves? This is the real gift we are denying men by hiding behind our defenses. When we make up who we are, that make-up which reveals our extreme self-criticism and self-judgment. Lack of self-love is not attractive. Instead, it energetically draws the unconscious male complement, both partners complicit in fooling the other. By denying our own humanity, our own beautiful womanhood, we make objects of ourselves. Men are only responding to the signal we are putting out. I know I am worthless in myself, but with all I can do to please you, please choose me. I will do anything to keep your attention on me, because my survival depends upon it. I will be loyal to you and to the patriarchy. I will betray my sisters if I need to. I will choose you over myself. Perhaps when we let go of our disguises, our men will deny us, disgusted by our wrinkles, our normal bodies. They will look for other women, women more compliant, still obedient to the patriarchy. And so be it. This generation may have to wear it. Luckily, more and more women are rising who will see you, who will love you just as you are. And I suspect there are men who are ready to, too. A quote from A Course of Love. To know the love that is what you are, as what you are, without the interference of the self of form, is to know the perfection of your particular form, of your particular vulnerabilities, of the conditions and environment of the life you were given, of the ground of your being, and to cease to wish that any of it were different. When you cease to wish that any of it were different, you quit restricting the miracle of creation that is who you are. The end.